Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the time. Thank you everyone for joining and watching. Everyone who is joining and watching, we very much appreciate it. The introduction from View is actually a really interesting way to segue into the conversation that we're going to be having, which also focuses on energy efficiency in the built environment. And to do that, we have a number of really fantastic speakers who I will let introduce themselves. And I think we're going to start with Brad and then Tony, and finally, last but not least, Ariel. So Brad, if you wouldn't mind turning on your mic and giving a brief introduction about who you are and what you're up to.
Sure, thanks, Jonathan. Hi, everybody. I'm Brad Surak. I'm the Chief Product Officer at a company called Turntide. And we develop sustainability technologies that focus on decarbonizing some of the most energy intensive industries in the world. So built environment, commercial buildings, we support the electrification of transport, both industrial and commercial, and then we focus on sustainable operations in agriculture as well.
Fantastic. And Tony, can you give a brief intro?
Hello, everybody. I'm Tony Pan. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Modern Electron. We're a deep tech energy startup in the Seattle area, and our mission is to make energy both cleaner and cheaper. We're particularly focused on the problem of heat. Heat is 50% of final energy demand. And right now, there are many sectors in heat that are hard to decarbonize. So we look towards introducing new tech to tackle this giant problem.
And last but not least, Ariel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me at TiEcon. Really excited to be here. I'm Ariel Gross-Samuels. I am the Global Head of Environmental, Social, and Governance Business at Meta, which you may have recognized as Facebook prior to October. So what that means is that for the 200 million businesses on our platform, the 10 million active advertisers, my team looks after ways that we can accelerate actions they can take to promote ESG progress.
And I think that's a really great place to start with just sort of the broad context of ESG and Facebook and how y'all are approaching things. So Facebook became carbon neutral in 2020, is that right?
Correct.
And I'm wondering, when you think about what the priorities are now going forward for Facebook and for those partners that you're working with and helping to support, where do you see sort of the next levers that y'all are going to pull? You've already reduced, I think, your energy consumption by 87% or nearly 90% versus 2017 levels. You're looking to pursue a number of initiatives around sort of water resources and water preservation, and looking at energy intensity in data centers. But I'm jumping the gun, spoilers. I want you to talk a little bit about how y'all are thinking through this next wave of sort of Facebook's decarbonization efforts and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and sustainability more broadly.
Perfect. Thank you. And you've done your homework, so hats off to you. So, you know, at Meta, we take sustainability incredibly seriously. From our founding in 2004 till today, serving a global population of 3.6 billion people, we've thought extensively about how we can have a really green footprint, how we can decarbonize, and also how we, as a platform, can promote sustainability progress across businesses, partners, and our broader ecosystem of communities. So yes, exactly what you said. We are net zero across scope 1 and 2 emissions as of 2020. We've also made a commitment that by 2030, we're going to be net zero across our value chain, so scope 3. We're also going to be water positive by 2030. And there's a number of investments that we're making here. So I'll sort of hit the top of the waves and then happy to dig in. So first of all, this might come as a surprise to the people tuning in here today, but climate legitimacy is a real problem that we continue to see in the world, right? Not everyone agrees that climate change matters, that the world warming up 1.5 degrees Celsius will cause havoc. And so given the scale and size of our platform, what we do first and foremost is address climate legitimacy through our products. The Climate Science Center is one such destination where we actually provide third-party verified information at scale. We've reached now over 200 million people since launch to really help equip people with information, research, education around climate science. We also know that private capital as a lever is going to be hugely important in shaping the innovation landscape of climate. And so our platform has fundraised over $130 million towards climate and environment across Facebook and Instagram. And you may have seen more recently that we announced Frontier alongside Stripe and Alphabet, which is a $925 million advanced market commitment for carbon capture and removal technologies. And I think this is really important because, you know, as we think about the role that the private sector can play, signaling to entrepreneurs that their innovations will have demand once they come to market is actually really important. So that's how we think about it, sort of from a a top line perspective. You mentioned our data centers, and I'm cognizant that we have other speakers. So again, I'll be fast here, but I'm really proud of our data centers. They are LEED Gold. They are 80% more water efficient than the average data center. And not only are they quite efficient, and we've actually open sourced through our Open Compute project the architecture, the blueprint of our data centers. Not only are they incredibly efficient, we also think about where does the energy come from that powers those data centers. And as we think about, you know, our growth as a company building out the metaverse, there's only going to be a proliferation of data centers. So getting this right really, really matters in terms of our footprint. And so with that, we focus on supporting new wind and solar projects that are on the same electrical grid that powers our data centers. So we are a huge corporate buyer of renewable energy. We have current contracts in place with over 6 gigawatts of wind and solar across 18 states and 5 countries. And then we collaborate with utilities, state regulators, and other customers to ensure that we are really promoting clean energy throughout. So one last thing on data centers, and then I'll stop talking here because I could go on. We also think about circularity in the design sense of the data center. So when we think about, you know, not only are we using the most recyclable materials, you know, polypropylene instead of high carbon materials for our data centers, also when we decommission hardware parts, we find opportunities for third parties to actually reuse them. So we really are trying to think end to end about how we operate. I'll pause there.
No, it's fine. I really appreciate it. And the excitement, I think, is both palpable and encouraged, right? Like, we need more companies to be like Meta in this respect, to embrace the sort of new wave of technologies that are coming that are going to accelerate this decarbonization effort globally. And speaking of this new wave of technologies that are coming to accelerate the wave of decarbonization globally, wow, that was a mouthful. Both Brad and Tony are working on things that I think have significant applications in the data center realm, I think, as well as far beyond it, in terms of the ways in which they're pulling different levers themselves to improve energy efficiency, in the case of what Brad and Turntide are doing, and really finding better ways to generate clean energy using existing resources, which is what Modern Electron is all about, right, Tony? And I think that now would be a great time for Brad, I think specifically maybe and then Tony, to address exactly how both of your companies are tackling sort of the problem of energy consumption in the built environment. And then we'll go back around the horn with another round of penetrating questions, hopefully. So.
Great, yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I think it's great to see the energy and passion that Ariel and the team at Meta are putting into really innovating around net zero, because I think that's one thing that we hold near and dear to our hearts here at Turntide. We set the mission of our company up to be really optimizing how the world uses energy, because we see that there's no path to 100% clean energy without reducing demand. You can't generate enough, even with new renewables coming on, to accommodate the demand and the increasing demands that are happening in the world. And so we really focus on putting together the talent and the technology into our company so we can partner with companies who are going on this net zero journey in order to help innovate on the technologies that they need in order to drive down energy usage or to manage the energy transition in their industries. So in building side, built infrastructure, which you heard from the prior speaker, 40% of the energy usage, really comes from buildings. And what we've recognized is most of that energy usage, surprisingly, is consumed by electric motors. It's not by lighting. It's not by some of the things you might think. It's electric motors. And when you think about all the different ways motors are used in the world, it's a huge impact if you can find, creative and innovative ways to innovate on a device that really hasn't seen much innovation over the past, 100 years. So what we did on the motor side was invent the world's most efficient electric motor. We found a way to shift the complexity of the motor out of the hardware and into software. So it's really applying advanced algorithms and software to operate what is really a mechanically much simpler motor design that doesn't use any rare earth magnets or materials. So it's a very, environmentally sustainable physical design. The complexity is all in the software that operates that motor. And then we work with companies to deploy that out into, say, HVAC systems, which use 60% of the power in a building. And that's where we get into the data center side, working with companies like Meta and others, where we can come in and help really reduce the consumption on the fan arrays and the cooling systems in data centers and other types of commercial buildings. We also work with transport companies who are going on this journey from internal combustion to electrification, and that we focus there not on the passenger car market, which gets a lot of attention, but we focus more on the long tail of electrification that's coming. So think of off-highway vehicles, construction equipment, marine applications, farming equipment, massive amounts of vehicles there that oftentimes sit idle, but with their engines running and producing greenhouse gases. So we really partner with these companies to electrify the drivetrain and other systems in these vehicles.
And so if y'all are taking approach around electrification, Tony, what Modern Electron is doing is, correct me if I'm wrong, if I remember correctly, not only using waste heat and natural gas to sort of create cleaner types of energy for buildings and other industrial applications. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And I just also want to give a shout out to Turntide. I love, because in some sense what they're doing is, our company mission at Modern Electron is to make energy both cleaner and cheaper. We think you can't have one without the other. It's unfair. And when Brad says, right, like reducing consumption, it just comes down for me to one word: efficiency. They're making things way more efficient. So you're doing more with less, which means automatically you save money and reduce emissions at the same time. And so I think it's a no-brainer. It's not, sometimes it's not quite as sexy, but it's one of the most critical things, I think, on the journey to climate change. And so just towards what you mentioned we were doing, right? We have two platform technologies at Modern Electron. One is really heat into electricity conversion. There is a lot of wasted heat on the planet today. So for us, that is really an efficiency play. We're going to capture something that's wasted and produce electricity from it, which is valuable. So for example, if you heat your home right now with some kind of furnace or heat your water with a boiler, we can put a device inside that captures the wasted energy and produces bonus electricity. This means you need to buy less electricity from your utility. And so it's, again, this should save money and reduce emissions at the same time. And just to make one last connection, our second platform technology is hydrogen generation, how you can produce clean fuel. And in fact, this ties to Ariel's mention of what Meta is talking about. To get to net zero, we probably need carbon capture. It's not enough just to do clean generation. We won't make it in time. So even in the Paris Agreement itself, it bakes in this idea that we need to remove CO2 from the atmosphere. Well, as it turns out, most hydrogen produced today is through a process that produces CO2 going into the atmosphere. But our company just announced a project last week, actually, where we're going to go to an agricultural farm, literally going to collect cow poop, cow manure, and right now, right, it just rots and releases methane in the atmosphere. That's bad. But we have a process to take that biogas, which is technically carbon neutral, right? The cows are sucking the CO2 from the atmosphere as they live and grow and eat. We're going to take the biogas from their waste and they were going to strip the carbon as a solid out of it to produce clean hydrogen. And so not only can we further clean the biogas into hydrogen and avoid the CO2 emissions, but this is effectively negative emissions. We are stripping the carbon away from this fuel and putting it back in the ground. And so we also see that as part of the solution of doing, pretty crazy tech in order to tackle the grand challenge of climate change.
I mean, it sounds like a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it, right? Sorry, I'm kidding. It was a joke.
Yeah.
Terrible joke, but it was a joke.
At this point, I think we need to go to the unobvious sectors, right? To get to zero.
Definitely. Now, one thing that I want to shift the topic a little bit. And since this is the Indus Entrepreneurs Conference, it might be good to talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial opportunities that sort of exist around the climate crisis or climate challenge right now. And I'd love to just sort of get a sense from everyone about kind of what y'all think, where you see holes in the market still, where you see a need for new solutions to come online that are either complementary to or adjacent to or may build upon the kind of technologies that y'all are deploying in the case of Turntide and Modern Electron. And for Meta, whether it be sort of better software to understand and analyze and get a sense of the emissions that you're seeing, windows into the actual operations of the company, or on a more operational level. I mean, you mentioned the carbon capture work that y'all are supporting with Frontier, which is an incredible initiative, and one that we're very supportive of at Footprint Coalition as well. Just sort of where y'all are seeing holes and what sort of opportunities exist for the next generation of entrepreneurs that may in fact be listening to this panel right now. And I guess we'll go around the horn again. So Ariel, if you wanted to weigh in on that, that'd be good.
This is such a great question. And I want to start by actually talking about the state of youth entrepreneurship, because as we think about the role that leaders can play across businesses, across policymakers, actually building a diverse pipeline of entrepreneurs is critical. And I think this conference is convening those entrepreneurial minds as is. So I think this is really important. We just did research alongside The Economist to survey 3,000 people across the world to understand how has COVID and the broader, pandemic implications had an impact on their entrepreneurial aspirations. And I'll just give you the quick insights here because I think it's really interesting. Huge aspiration versus reality gap. 77% of the young people that we interviewed, so these are Gen Z and millennial people across the world, 77% aspired to be an entrepreneur, with only 9% identified as one. So that was interesting. There's a huge gap. And then in terms of why is that? What was driving that setback? Economic anxiety. So this desire for a more traditional, labor opportunity to have, a steady paycheck. Education, but also gender. And particularly for young women, there was more than 10% of men and women who aspired to be entrepreneurs. And the young women really shared that they were not seeing role models in STEM, and that was creating a risk aversion to becoming entrepreneurs. So as we think about entrepreneurship writ large and how we're building that pipeline of talent to be tackling climate, because by the way, the people who are going to be most impacted by the climate crisis are young. They're the people who might not even be born yet today. So we really need young minds and young entrepreneurs thinking about this. So to answer your question about market gaps, right? What are some innovations? I think what's really alarming is we're not fully taking advantage of actions that individuals can take in a super micro day-to-day way. We did an initiative recently. It was Meta alongside Nestle and Pepsi and an NGO called the Recycling Partnership. What we identified is that 20 million tons of recyclable material end up in landfill each year. I thought, okay, what can we do to start to even chip away at that problem? And we recognized the huge issue at play was that people didn't know what to recycle. When you're standing in front, you've got your compost bin, your recycling bin, your trash can, and you look at what's in your hand, where do you put what? And so what we did is we built a messenger bot, and it used hyper-local information that would be both authoritative and real-time that people could use in the palm of their hand. And we deployed this bot alongside a campaign and alongside community groups, these community for recycling Facebook groups where people could convene to actually give people quizzes and real-time information so they can make better recycling decisions. And sure enough, we increased recycling confidence by 23%. And we're now working with local MRFs to understand, are we actually volumetrically impacting the recyclable material in the communities where we deployed this product? And so, you know, this is a small example, but if we had thousands of these proliferating, just innovations that would actually impact our day-to-day decisions and behaviors, I think that'd make a huge, huge impact on the world. And so I would love to ask entrepreneurs to be thinking about what are local, you know, small tactical behavioral changes that we can make, as we also explore like these massive technological improvements in the world. What are some small changes that we can make behaviorally?
Brad, anything that you think is coming down the pike that's of interest to you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, building off of what Ariel said, it's huge opportunities for innovation. In fact, innovation is absolutely required for us to address the challenges ahead. And so from an entrepreneur standpoint, and I'll classify even entrepreneurs within larger companies because there are a lot of people who are looking at, you know, new models and modeling entrepreneurialism into larger organizations. The whole infrastructure of core industries are shifting as sustainability moves from a compliance topic into a competitive strategy. And so as the buyers in major organizations start to look for suppliers as they get into scope 3 for sustainably operated products, those people who create products really need to think differently about the dimension of competitive differentiations on the products themselves. So, you know, we used the motor as an example. Take what Tony's doing on the hydrogen capture from farms. Hey, we're helping to electrify farm equipment. There are no charging stations at farms. Hydrogen fuel cells that charge batteries that then go into tractors that are electrified. There's nothing out there, you know, readily available. That infrastructure is going to be, there's going to be a massive shift in the infrastructure of how industries operate. The whole work site of the future, the way a construction site looks in the future when you have electrified excavators and construction equipment, the whole way it's operated, the software layer on this is so important to optimize how batteries are managed and used, and you know, on and on, and then the interplay of all of this. So I think there's huge opportunities. I'll close this by just saying I think it's incumbent though upon the larger organizations that are currently anchoring these ecosystems to create avenues for the concerned citizens to get engaged and apply. So, you know, we're launching something called Net Zero Heroes, where we're highlighting how individuals are driving this. We can see making data available to large numbers of concerned data scientists who can go provide algorithmic based energy conservation, you know, measures into the infrastructure of the world. I think there's a lot that as an ecosystem we can all do to go encourage this. We're really excited about the opportunities from a business standpoint here.
And Tony, do you have any either advice for entrepreneurs about how to get started with a sort of starting up a climate tech or climate focused business, or any particular areas that you're excited about right now? And then there's a question that came in from the panel and from the audience, and I want to address that after you finish, if that's okay, Tony.
Sure, and actually I think that's a good answer too. I think the question was around air conditioning, and I think there's a projection that the world is going to need 5 billion air conditioners in the next few decades. So whoever is going to make a more efficient, cheaper air conditioner is going to help save the world and make a lot of money. But when I think about opportunity in climate tech, I think about one word: materials. So just the stuff that goes into building things. So there's been a lot of progress in making energy, and that's a bit of what my company does too, right? Electricity and heat. But earlier, probably you saw the talk from View that buildings is 40% of emissions. Well, about a third of that, almost a third, is coming from literally the stuff going into building the building. It's like concrete, steel. Those things are massive emitters, and that's actually a lot of where technology is lagging in terms of decarbonization. And so I think those are very big opportunities. Even in my earlier statistic, right, heat is 50% of final energy demand. Well, you know where a lot of that heat is going? It's going into making like industrial materials, everything from literally like you heat, like you'll use heat to roast coffee beans, to make glass, to make steel, to make silicon for chips. It's used everywhere. So I think technology itself is lagging more towards making materials net zero, and that's where we can use a lot of innovation.
I completely agree. And I think there was a study just today that was published that talked about sort of $1 trillion of investment is needed to sort of move to decarbonize the cement or concrete industry. And you mentioned cooling as an example. There are a bunch of new heat pump companies that are actually doing heating and cooling and are designed to be much more efficient. Companies like Gradient, which is a new startup that's doing some interesting things around modular heat pumps for heating and cooling. I mean, the breadth of opportunity that's available to would-be entrepreneurs to develop new solutions for sort of the climate crisis is almost unparalleled. I mean, if you think of any industry, it needs to be decarbonized or defossilized. There's a need to find alternatives to the chemicals that we rely on. All of the materials that we use are either made with some sort of fossil fuel, or are made from some sort of fossil fuel extract, right? You can't have plastics or any kind of coatings really in the modern world without using oil and gas. And as we move away from oil and gas, hopefully entirely, all of those things are going to need to be replaced. And on top of that, when we talk about efficiency, and this, I guess I'm having the last word, I'm sorry, but I'm doing it. This is the benefit of being a moderator. When you think about efficiency, there are plenty of opportunities for talented software developers and engineers to really pull those levers of data mining, data organization, and oversight to provide solutions to these problems as well. It's going to take sort of all of the different technological levers that we can pull to solve this problem. And with that, I apologize for having the last word, but I'm taking it. It's really a pleasure to talk to all of you today. It's been an amazing conversation. I appreciate the insights very much. I hope the audience did as well. And thank you so much for agreeing to participate. Really wonderful to see y'all. Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. You are a pro. You know how to draw out your panel. Terrific panel, and I'm so glad to see young faces. You know, sometimes I feel I'm like a dinosaur myself. So it was great to see young, fresh faces. And thank you, John, for running a great panel.